Okay, hello? Hello, can everyone hear? Okay. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the to our seminar on international good practices in project implementation monitoring. My name is Addison Everett, and I've been asked by the AIIB to moderate this panel discussion, which we're very much looking forward to. Obviously, project management is very, very important to the success not only of individual projects, but also to each of the institutions meeting their critical objectives to which they've committed to their various stakeholders, and now ever increasing group of stakeholders, which makes all of that quite a bit more complicated and challenging. We've had a lot of good discussion over the last couple of days, and one of the things that that I hadn't known is the level of discussion and collaboration among all of the panel members and their respective institutions, which I think really does strengthen their ability to help manage and support projects in meeting their objectives. As I said, my name is Addison Everett. I've been with PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC, for 35 years. I was a partner until last year. I've been retained as a senior advisor by the firm to work on various projects, which I continue to find quite exciting. I've worked in my career with many banks, both commercial and MDBs, in the area of project management, loan management, restructuring, workout, different aspects of this area. And I think we're going to have a very fascinating discussion today in light of many of the recent developments that could broadly be characterized as introducing a fair amount of uncertainty into all aspects of the environment in which the banks operate. I first want to, before I introduce the panelists, I first want to express my sincere thanks to AIIB for asking me to act as moderator for this event. I also want to express my sincere gratitude to the government of Egypt for supporting this event, and their hosting, I think, has been very much world-class, so I certainly appreciate that. With that, what I'd like to do is first I will introduce our panelists. Then each of them will have a chance to provide a bit of an introduction and some of their perspectives in this area. I think it'll be interesting to note that while there may be some different perspectives, there's also a lot that they have in common, and I think we'll be getting to that. After this introduction, then we will move into 4 topical areas. We'll have some discussion among certain of our panel members, and then we will absolutely leave time for questions at the end. So with that, what I'd like to do, and if the audience will excuse me, I will read, as I don't want to get any of the titles wrong. We have a very distinguished group of panelists here, and I'll start at the far end with Guido Bicasau, a director of counterparty management, portfolio management, and monitoring at the EIB. Welcome. Next, sitting next to him is Natasha Konjankova, who is the managing director banking portfolio for the EBRD. Next to Natasha is Oseno Nakalima, Director of Global Portfolio for the IFC. And then finally, Rayhan Kausar, who is the Director of Portfolio Management at ADB. Welcome to all of our staff. Oh, I forgot the most important member here from AIIB, Ka Feng, who is the Director General of the Implementation Monitoring Department, or as we call it, the IMD. Very, very sorry, my friend.
No problem.
Okay. So what I'd like to do next is just give each of our panelists a few minutes to provide some of their insights and thoughts and perspectives. Cobb, maybe we could start with you.
Thank you, Edison, for your introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ke Fang. I joined the AIIB in 2016, almost 8 years ago when the bank just started its operation. So I was the first manager in the investment operation department, responsible for business development, origination projects, building up a team, and also developing process, procedures, etc. Yeah. 2 years later, when the bank has already built up a small portfolio, management decided to create a dedicated team to look after the portfolio. I was assigned to lead that team. Later, the team becomes IMD, the Implementation Monitoring Department. I will talk about the function of this department in a minute. But before I joined AIIB, I worked for World Bank for 15 years, mainly in urban water transport sectors in East Asia, South Asia, and also Africa. I was doing quite a lot of projects before moving to the IMD. Now, back to IMD's functions. IMD, when we look at created this department, look at our portfolio management, we wanted to take approach to looking after both the forests and the trees. Right? The forest means the entire portfolio. So we have a team overseeing, it's a centralized team, basically overseeing the entire portfolio, all the products. And then we also want to look after all the trees, right? Each individual assets investment. So we have many different project teams, private sector loans, sovereign loans, equity, capital market products, etc. All these teams, taking care of the project during implementation stage. Some of those teams are part of IMD, particularly on those private sector fund equity project. Others are still with the the origination departments, but they are part of the entire portfolio management structure. And then we promote a proactive portfolio management approach, trying to identify issues earlier and before they become problems. Right? And then one thing we can discuss more detail later is we have developed a strong, we call it knowledge feedback loops, so that the experience learned during project implementation stage can be feedback to the origination to help the new deal team to prepare a better quality project. I think I first start.
That's great.
Thanks.
So,
yeah.
Guido, please.
Thank you to everybody, and thank you, Addison, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank for inviting me to this distinguished panel. So my name, as Addison said, is Guido Bichizao. I've been at the European Investment Bank for the last 29 years. I've been for many years in the finance directorate in many capacities. Then I became director of strategy and relationship with multilaterals, G7, G20, and other institutions. And then since more than 5 years, I'm responsible for project management and monitoring for the portfolio of public sector, corporates, and financial institutions. In this experience as portfolio management, I have seen in the last years quite an evolution. First of all, because of the regulatory framework, and we as a multilateral, we have an article in our statute that require the bank to align with best market practices as applicable to AIIB, and hence our governance has asked us to closely look at the best way to organize ourselves in order to monitor a portfolio in an effective way. This has led to a complete separation between origination and monitoring. So in 2021, our governing bodies decided to ensure that the origination function is focused on the origination, signature, and the first disbursement. After the first disbursement, all projects are moved to the portfolio management function. This has very profound implications in terms of client management, of course, but also of risk monitoring in all the different facets of risk. And in fact, this has become particularly visible during the last few years, first the pandemic, and later the Ukrainian war with the energy crisis, whereby we were asked to look very carefully at the vulnerability of our portfolio and the possibility that the portfolio would deteriorate, identifying at an early stage any potential case of concern, which would clearly lead also to us proposing collective provisioning or specific provisioning for the balance sheet of the bank. So maybe I stop here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Natasha Konjankova. It's really a great pleasure and honor to be part of this panel. I, like Guido, am an old-timer at EBRD, so I've just celebrated my 30th anniversary and also have done many different things at the bank, worked in our financial institutions team, in our corporate recovery team dealing with problem assets. I was leading our business in Russia, then in Central Asia and Turkey. But 5 years ago, I joined the portfolio team as managing director. Now, my team was actually created just over 5 years ago, and this was due to the decision at EBRD to create a very distinct portfolio function. Previously, the sector teams that were responsible for origination, they continued to manage the portfolio. But it was agreed that it's very important to increase the focus on portfolio, on the monitoring, and actually, as Guido mentioned, to be able to very early on identify emerging problems and also to take proactive early action to address this. So the way that our team works, I have a group of very experienced portfolio managers that look after the corporate sector and the infrastructure sector in my team. But they work very closely, directly with bankers who are operation leaders, we call them that are actually doing the work with the client in monitoring the project. Of course, it's very important when you monitor projects to focus a lot on the financials of the client because, for us, it's critical to make sure that the client continues to be able to repay our debt. But as equally important, and this is what my team focuses on, is the actual physical implementation of projects, because only when the projects are successfully implemented, then we as MDB deliver the impact that we originally put as an objective. So on the implementation side, I'd just like to perhaps, again, to add to my colleagues, focus on one aspect that we find very important when looking at the portfolio, and this is the capacity of our clients, of our partners on the ground to actually deliver the projects. And I think one of the key strengths of EBRD is that we have very strong presence on the ground, so the bankers are there to work with the clients, to support them on an ongoing basis. And also, importantly, the bank, using the support of donors, but also the Special Shareholder Fund, we provide significant technical assistance to our public sector clients to really build their capacity. And this could be helping set up a project implementation unit with the public authority, or, for example, bringing in consultants to help with the public procurement process, which, as many of you know, is very challenging at times, or helping develop a public service agreement, and any other support that's needed. So I think this combination of very close monitoring of the financials and implementation, and really supporting the client in implementation, is important for us. So I'll stop here and
Thanks,
pass on.
Natasha. Oseno.
Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Hussein Nakulima. I work for the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group, in charge also of portfolio management. And just like Natasha, Guido, and Kefang, our organization is, I would say, similar. It's about having at the central level a view of the forest, and at the regional industrial level a view of the trees. Having, until recently, people dedicated to portfolio management. But interestingly, we are testing another model where some people will be responsible end-to-end of the investment process. What organization works best, it remains to be seen. But at the end of the day, there are two things that I've learned from my experience in this function. The first thing is that actually it's never boring. It's always stimulating, because you would expect in portfolio to just monitor something that has been decided before the project was approved, but actually you are faced with unexpected situations, and more unexpected, because we are in a world where we have crises coming one after the other. I learned a term recently, which is polycrisis. So many crises are arriving at the same time, which means that what you expected your project to deliver or to experience is very different from what you see on the ground. So you need to be able to respond to the unexpected, and more importantly, to anticipate the unexpected. So that's one of our challenges. And the second thing I learned was that expectations from our stakeholders are increasingly complex. Previously, we thought about portfolio as tracking the financials, making sure that your debt is reimbursed, making sure that the valuation of your equity investment increases. But especially as development finance institutions, we expected to also give more and more information on the climate footprint of our project, the climate risk on our project, the impact on our project. So we need to find a way to balance all these different expectations and give a comprehensive view. So it's an exciting job, and so very much looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Oseno. Rehan, please.
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you. My name is Rehan Kalzer. I'm from the Asian Development Bank, which is headquartered in Manila, for those of you who may not know. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude to AIIB, and of course to the government of the Arab Republic of Egypt for hosting this event, and thank you for all the warm hospitality. ADB is an institution with 68 member countries, which are shareholders in the institution. And we actually have a portfolio size of about $120 billion. And that corresponds to about 700 projects ongoing at any given time, average on a year basis. We bring to approval about $20 to $25 billion. It was much higher during COVID-19. And I'd like to say that project implementation and project monitoring is really at the heart of development impact and meeting development outcomes. Because, you know, it is, there's you know, when you're working in the public sector space, there are issues related to capacity because your counterpart agencies are maybe not necessarily just implementing your project, but they're actually implementing several projects from their own funds, from maybe the World Bank, AIIB, ADB, and so forth. So it's very important, like Natasha said, to keep building the capacity and to keep that in mind. And it's also very important, I think one of the important things when monitoring in projects is to take preemptive action. Don't wait for the thing to happen. Try to identify it early, and we'll discuss that more through some of the questions that will be asked. And more importantly, it's very important to extract lessons learned during project implementation, capture them, and use them before you design the next project, because only that way you can improve. Each project is different. It's not the size of the project. A $10 million project in the agriculture sector may be more difficult to implement than a $500 million project in the transport sector. So each project, you know, you may be working with, and it's different, you know, I mean, when you're working in some of the more stronger countries, you know, the capacities are strong, and some of those are countries like PRC, India, etc. You've got very strong counterpart agency, but then when you're working in the more fragile and the small island states, like in the Pacific and all that, then of course the challenges are different. But anyway, I will stop here because I'm sure that I can elaborate more during the discussion. So back to you, Addison. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Rehan, and thanks to all of the panelists. This is obviously a very seasoned group of professionals here. And we'll go into some of our topical discussion now. And the first topic, and I'll get back, Natasha, to a point that you made you used the word proactive, which I think is critically important. I think all of the panel would agree that it's critically important. But then, you know, to be focused on being proactive, you need to establish early warning indicators. So as Rehan said, each of these projects are so fundamentally different that an early warning indicator for one, you know, may not be relevant to another. So let's start with you, if you don't mind, Natasha. What do you do in terms of early warning indicators to flag potential problems where they may need extra attention or the borrowers may need some assistance?
Well, here it's absolutely critical to follow the financial situation of the client on an ongoing basis. So we have regular monitoring reviews of each project to make sure that the client is performing well. And of course, if there are any breaches of covenants, if any of the financial ratios are not what we expect them to be, that causes some alarm signals to go off, and a deeper dive to understand what are the reasons. Is this a temporary issue, or is this something more structural that requires corrective action? So I think very much on the financial side, it's important to closely monitor. But as I mentioned, for us, the implementation of the project is as important. So the monitoring includes not only looking at financials, but looking at the stage of the project implementation. You know, is the construction going well? Is the ramp up of the project going well? Have the suppliers delivered? All of these aspects are considered by the bankers when they look at the project during the monitoring stage.
All right, well, that's great. So there's some clear objective warning signs, but also there's a fair bit of subjectivity and real professional judgment involved. Guido, what are your thoughts on this one?
Well, we worked extensively in the last 2-3 years on a AWS system. Again, it comes from regulation, and the point is indeed to early on identify critical situations. But it's classifying. It's not only just identifying, it's classifying the risk to set aside the proper capital. And this is really the bottom line of the regulator. After the crisis in 2008, any bank, be an institution or not, has a much more compelling duty to ensure that the capital measure against the exposures is properly measured. So we developed a very articulated system that requires a follow-up on a regular basis. And it is also an indication for potential downgrades of counterparts. We perform internal ratings for all the counterparts. In my portfolio, I have 3,000 counterparts for a portfolio about 400 billion euros. And the importance of ensuring that the rating is always up to date has become more and more important. And EWS, and I will conclude here, is coupled with the concept of materiality. So materiality is the concept that regulators have introduced, whereby whenever the portfolio manager is aware of any piece of information that might have material impact to the rating of the counterpart and the risk assessment of the counterpart, has the duty to immediately reflect it into the rating. So the EWS allows the early identification of a potential material information that then is assessed, and if the assessment leads to the understanding of a potential increase in the credit risk, then this is translated into the rating, capital allocation, and all the toolkit for the risk assessment.
Well, that's wonderful, Guido. So it really is a robust rating system that's tied very closely to capital, which is obviously very important for all of the banks. Rehan, you mentioned the wide diversity of projects and the challenges that poses. What are your views on early warning indicators in that regard?
Yeah, so let me just go back a step further. Before we take a project for approval, we really check how ready is the project. Project ready, lack of readiness leads to implementation delays. I can guarantee for that. We generally go for a targeted implementation period of about 5 plus or minus years. Generally, we're averaging more like 6.5, 6.7. Now we're moving more towards the objective of making sure that these projects are design ready, so that the designs are up there, and procurement ready. Because if you go for a project without doing this upfront readiness work, you're looking at adding another 2 years of maybe delay. Second thing, now when we get into the implementation, we've actually developed quite a good project performance rating system. It's similar to a child's report card in school. You assess the project on a quarterly basis. There are 5 indicators, or let's say 5 subjects in the school, and they're classified. We use a traffic light system. If it's red, that means the project is at risk. If it's yellow, it's for attention, and if it's green, it's on track. So it's just like a traffic light. You can go or you have to stay. And that is a very good sign. That's a very good way of telling the project teams what actions need to be taken and where their efforts need to be directed to ensure that they move out of the red and move out of the risk and then move more towards to bringing the project on track. Because it's about meeting the development outcome. There are beneficiaries out there waiting for those water connections to be built or for that road to connect to the marketplace and so forth. So we do that. Third thing is we encourage our teams to do as much review missions as possible. And the more complex the project is, and when I say use the word complex, that maybe means that the safeguards, et cetera, is a bit more challenging. The environmental concerns may be higher. The resettlement challenges may be greater than a normal project. Then we would encourage more review missions in the field. And we're not talking about just going to the field and talking to the client, but actually we want project teams to walk the lines, walk those roads, and actually talk to the contractors, talk to the beneficiaries and all that. So that's another way. The other thing is, let me just say this, the best indicator of project implementation is disbursements. There's no better proxy indicator than that. If you're not disbursing, your project is not moving. So we have established a whole set of early warning indicators, and I'll just list a few. For example, if a project from approval till year 1 has not disbursed anything, that's a red flag. If there's another project which after 5 years has not reached 30% disbursement, that's another red flag. So, or if a project is consistently at risk for 4 quarters or more, we have a problem. So these are the kind of indicators where we take preemptive action. We will send signals to the project team that, listen, it's time, I don't know, you need to take the corrective actions to put this project back on track. So each project, of course, brings its own challenges. We try, right now, we have about 67% of the projects which are generally on track, and we have about 10% which are at risk, and the balance is for attention. And these are, if everything was green, I would be very worried.
Right,
Because that means,
Rehan, great, that's fantastic. So what the message, the clear message that I'm taking away is an integrated, is review and management over an integrated project life cycle, right? Which is, and I think that's obviously a critically important point. We now move on to a second topic that the panel wanted to discuss, and this is collaboration. And I think, you know, given the theme of the meeting overall, and given, you know, some of the important issues that banks really are helping to tackle globally with governments and their other stakeholders, is the matter of collaboration. How can the banks collaborate? And there has been some press about that recently. And I know, Oseno, that you're quite passionate about this and have some remarks that you want to make. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Edison. I think we are doing pretty well in terms of collaboration in some areas, and there are some areas where we can do better because it's complicated. Where we're doing very well is, for instance, co-financing. With EBRD, I looked at our portfolio, we have more than 130 projects that we are actually co-financing, which is quite sizable. We have a very large, complex project that we are co-financing, even in this country, Egypt. Benban with AIIB has been a fantastic experience. Yesterday afternoon, there was a panel and the Minister of Finance mentioned that. There is another area where collaboration is sometimes difficult, but we are doing it very well. For instance, with the ADB in Asia, with EIB in Africa, or EBRD here, providing technical assistance. For instance, in we are co-financing technical assistance to the government in Egypt to procure desalination plants, or to procure, to attract investors in the education sector. And from experience, this is quite an achievement, speaking with one voice with the government. So this is working very well. I think where we can do more progress and work better, because it's not easy, is when we monitor the projects to make sure that we are simplifying the process for our clients to report, for instance, on what's happening on the ground. So that's something we are trying to do better by harmonizing our requirements. So that's one. The second point that will be coming is on the climate front, helping our client countries as well as our corporate clients tackle the risks related to climate change. So how can we together find creative ways to support them? That's also another area where we can do better, and we are trying to do better. Last but not least, the needs are huge, and there is increasing expectation that development finance institutions will help mobilize private sector financing because even if you take collectively the resources that we have, it's a drop in the ocean compared to the needs. So how can we together leverage the few resources that we have to attract more private sector financing by very early on, at an early stage, think about the synergies and the complementarity of our strengths. I think that's another area where we are trying to do better. So I'll stop here and then elaborate more later.
Well, thank you very much, Oseno, and I think you articulated that very well in your 3 points, and those are 3 points that I think are worthy of reflection more broadly. Ka, you also had some thoughts in this area.
Sure. I fully agree. Collaboration among MDB, DFI is super important. Needless to say all the benefits. For AIIB, from day one, when the bank was created, in our articles of agreement, the first article, the purpose of the bank is to foster sustainable economic growth. I think that part everybody knows. Sustainable economic development, improve infrastructure connectivity, create wealth in Asia through infrastructure investment, in the infrastructure and other product sector. But there is another part of this purpose. You know, Article 1 also has second paragraph, talks about the purpose of a bank is to promote regional cooperation and partnership in addressing development challenges by working in close collaboration with other multilateral and bilateral development institutions. So in our article agreement, the AOA, we already put the collaboration as one of our objectives. So, and then in the actual practice, we've been collaborating with other MDBs very well. Osiro already mentioned, collaboration, co-financing with IFC. We've done lots of projects together with World Bank, with the EBRD, and we also have with the ADB and the AIIB. All of them, we have worked together, and they also really give us lots of support through the collaboration. One particular point I want to highlight is because we, AIIB, consider collaboration is so important, our operational policy actually provided, some provisions which make it very easier for AIIB to collaborate with other MDBs. Basically, our policy allow us to utilize and other MDB's policies, provided that they are materially consistent with our policies. We can rely on their policies and their assessments during not only the project due diligence, but also through extended into the project implementation monitoring. That actually make it very easy, as mentioned, for us to collaborate with other MDBs, but also brings a lot of benefits to our clients by streamlining all the requirements and reducing duplicated procedures, documentation, and improve the efficiency of the operations. So at the project level, when we have those co-financing projects, we usually have a co-lenders agreement, and our teams will, make a joint site visits, joint meetings with the clients, with other co-lenders, and meet frequently to discuss issues together. But last point, at the portfolio level, we also exchange information about our portfolio and the approach and the issues we are facing. And we also meet at a different international fora like this one. All the managers of different portfolio teams meet together and discuss common issues and share our experience. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Colin. I think your point on leveraging the policies of the other banks, I think, is a very important one, and that one should give the bank a fair bit of agility, right? That you find, which I think is also very good. Again, I know we've got a lot of knowledge up here. We do have limited time, so I'll move quickly on to our next topic, and that's technology. I think we've all become increasingly aware of the developments in technology with generative AI. During the pandemic, the banks were very creative in their use of technologies with drones to survey projects and the like. And we just wanted to get a thought from a couple of panel members on where they think this is going with respect to project management. Natasha, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Thank you, Addison. But just before coming to this, I just wanted to add one point to the previous discussion as an example of the way that we cooperate. And we collectively have different framework arrangements, and one very tested element is mutual reliance when we work in public sector projects on procurement. So in these cases, one institution takes the lead for all procurement aspects, because of course for a client it would would be challenging to break a project into components, follow different rules, different procurement processes. So I think that's a very good example of mutual reliance. So just wanted to add that point. But Addison, coming back to technology, clearly digitalization, artificial intelligence, drones, they're all changing the way that infrastructure projects are organized and managed. And of course, it's already becoming an important factor in the monitoring of projects. And I wanted just to give a few examples specifically related to using drones in portfolio or in monitoring projects, in inspecting the assets. And I mean, clearly it becomes a very important element when we talk about assets that are difficult to reach otherwise, or difficult to inspect and maintain. And as an example, I mean, when we talk about, for instance, bridges, tunnels, we did a study a few years ago, and there was a bit of an assessment that just to examine, to inspect a deck of a bridge, it would take 4 people, full 8-hour shifts, really relying on heavy equipment, closing off the bridge and rerouting traffic. So quite a big exercise. Whereas if you use a drone, 2 people for 2 hours without any disruption to traffic. So you can see an immediate benefit there. Similarly, when you look at water sector, water distribution, how to identify leaks in the system, drones or satellites, and then if you use artificial intelligence for the analysis, it gives you a very good basis to identify leaks and determine where action needs to be taken. Or similarly, drones looking at dams, looking at water towers. Very difficult and expensive and time-consuming to do it using the sort of old-fashioned way, but here a very good approach using drones or construction sites. I mean, we're all very concerned to make sure that construction progresses well on time and that you see actually the work being done. Also, drones are being used for this. So we have worked with a number of our clients, and especially in the transport sector. In Georgia, the Ministry of Transport wanted to test this with us to go and inspect sections of the road that are difficult to access otherwise. In Tajikistan, again, a country where avalanches, landslides are quite frequent, and you want to understand where to take preventive maintenance, what kind of action to take. Again, using drones has proven to be very efficient.
Great, that's wonderful. Rayhan, I'd like to go next to you, but before I do, I'd like to make an addition or a refinement to the question. And I'm just wondering, with all of the lending that the banks are now doing in technology, like smart cities, for example, how is the bank using technology, or is that affecting the way that the banks use technology by making investments in these areas of technology?
Okay, that's a good question. We're just getting there. It hasn't really started yet, but what we have done actually, and I think you pointed it out, during COVID-19, I think that's when really the MDBs realized that they really have to invest more in technology. And just not to repeat what Natasha and others have said already, but for example, we used drones with AI, with artificial intelligence, using the SkyCatch technology to monitor some a port project in Nauru. But what we're doing a lot now is investing in satellites. And so we have a cooperation, we have an agreement framework with ESA, the European Space Agency, especially in places like Afghanistan. I mean, where you can't have teams on the ground. So, we're working with UN Ops, and with satellites, we will be able to actually gauge the progress and verify the deliverables that they've been agreed to with the Afghan government on some of the more urgent needs of the country, so that we don't completely isolate them further. So, technology is going to become more and more central. But having said that, I'm still a fan of human intervention. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better than actually a pair of hands and a pair of human eyes assessing the project's performance. So But in terms of using technology for future project design, definitely. I think we're going to be seeing more use of geospatial satellite data and all that imagery to decide which direction we want to go to. And I just wanted to just add one sentence on what was discussed previously on collaboration. I think this is the time to really collaborate, because the G20 actually called for all the MDBs to coordinate and align their efforts better if we are to meet these ambitious climate finance targets and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Rehan, and that's a great point. I mean, that the point on collaboration, I think, is very, very relevant. Oseno, I know that, again, you're doing a lot of work with your clients on technology. How is that impacting your project management?
Yes, so when we talk about technology today, we think a lot about tools, applications that use data. So that's the angle maybe I want to take. And the interesting thing about this is that, actually, two remarks. One is, even before thinking about sophisticated technology, we need the basic stuff to be there, which is actually having the data that we need. Meaning acquiring the data, storing it, organizing it. And it's much more difficult than we think, because we assume that this is already done and that we just need to have a fancy artificial intelligence and machine learning programs. But if you don't have the data right, if it's not complete, if it's not accurate, then you cannot do anything with it. And I must admit that we just realized, as we were trying to implement this program, that we didn't have the basic rights. It was less than 80% accurate compared to what we wanted. So that's the first step, is really to think about what data we need and how to get it. And we are in that process. Second remark is how to approach it once you have the data. And the way we are thinking about it is to think in terms of problem statement. It's not about what tool exists and what we can do with it, but what is the problem that today we are not able to solve with our traditional approaches, and how can the new tools, the new technologies help us address these problems. One example, a few months back, one of our senior managers asked us, how much are we doing in electric vehicles? So I was not able to provide the answer straight away. Why? Because traditionally, when you ask me how much we are doing in mining, I will just go in a database and then search for the mining projects. So how can we use now what we call unstructured data to answer these type of questions? Another question that we all have today, I'm sure you are receiving that type of questions, is what is the climate, the GHG footprint, the greenhouse gas emissions from your portfolio? Not an easy answer. How much, even going further, if you take your financial intermediaries, how much are the clients of your banks, of your private equity firms doing in terms of climate? And that requires not only the data, but also this technology. And so we're in the process of working on it, but I must admit that we're not there yet.
Thank you very much, Oseno. So the next topic is one that really relates, I think, closely to the points that people were making about stakeholder expectations. The G20 was mentioned, and their expectations have been quite widely publicized. And our next topic is very much related to project management, because sometimes those communications can be sensitive. There can be information from other sources, and it can be a challenge. So Guido, what are your thoughts on effective stakeholder communication around project management and meeting objectives?
So this is a very interesting question, a very difficult one, because when we talk about stakeholders, in fact, we have to acknowledge that stakeholders of multilaterals have different interests. And there is not a uniformity, so everybody wants the same thing. And there are different specialization. So when we look at a project, I have before emphasized mostly the credit risk, because the credit risk is probably the most seasoned. Is financial risk is something banks have done since their inception. But there are increasingly more risks that have been identified. So when we monitor the portfolio beyond the credit risk, we look at the compliance risk. we look at now at the climate risk. We, as portfolio managers in a multilaterals, differently from many banks, we do a project risk. And then we have to look at impact assessment. Now, when we have, as project management, we have to look at these 5 risks, and probably I'm forgetting some. Is it possible to believe that all these would perfectly well be managed? So that we can have a project that has a very limited credit risk, very high impact, no compliance risk, fantastic climate impact? Probably not. So the question becomes that there are trade-offs. And so when we do reporting for a specific reason. So we have multilaterals, we do climate reporting. We do very often together, but we have systematically this. We have always, each of us has risk reports, so credit risk reports that are being requested by our governing bodies. So each of these reports are addressing one specific item. But we do not have, and it's very difficult, it is a real challenge for multilaterals, but for the community of stakeholders, to look at the portfolio in a comprehensive way. And being able to strike a balance. You might want a limited impact with reduced risk and no compliance, for example. Or if you want, for example, to have more impact, you have to find donors' money to absorb the excessive risk. So we have to look at the implementation component of the variety of risk we have to manage. And this requires a dialogue that would be really very needed in this complex world. I stop here.
Thank you very much, Guido. Your comments, please, on stakeholder communications.
Sure, certainly this is a very important topic. I probably want to just focus on one important aspect. It's about the information, right? When you communicate, when you plan to have an effective communication with stakeholders, you have to make sure they get all the information. I think for AIIB, as we claim that we want to be a new MDB for the 21st century, so from very beginning, again, I think I want to highlight that the building into our gene is to have a very proactive information sharing, information disclosure with our stakeholders. So, our public information policy basically says, all the information, should be disclosed to the public. Only unless we have a compelling reason to say that there is a confidentiality requirements, etc. Otherwise, that's very important. It's not just for due diligence, but during the project implementation monitoring stage, we also do that. We need to update our project summary information whenever there is a change to the project. That document also contains the environment social information. Right? We require our clients to proactively disclose all the environment social management plans, update them, and also disclose the GIM, the grievance redressing mechanism information, so that to ensure our stakeholders would be able to access to the GIM, all the environment social requirements. And then for each individual project, we have a quarterly project information, quarterly or sometimes semi-annually project implementation monitoring reports. All these reports have to be disclosed to our board. And then for the sovereign-backed financing loans, those monitoring reports also disclosed to the public. And then in addition, at the portfolio level, we submit a quarterly portfolio monitoring report to our board. So our board actually gets all the information, and they also have access to our dashboards. You know, the
Perspectives from each of our panelists on sustainability and how it affects how meeting those ambitious objectives has affected project management, and what, you know, the banks could do collectively to help more effectively and efficiently, or most effectively and efficiently, achieve those ambitious objectives. Why don't we start with Rehan?
Sure. So thank you. Let me just do this as quickly as possible. You said this is a lightning round, right?
Lightning round.
Okay, so I have to go as fast as lightning. Okay, so in a project, when we evaluate a project, there are 4 components. Yeah, we look at its relevance, we look at its effectiveness, we check its efficiencies in terms, and the most important thing is sustainability. And sustainability, as far as AIIB, et cetera, that's where we have actually the biggest challenge, is to how to make the projects more sustainable. So, because, you know, once a project ends in 5-6 years, how are those assets going to be maintained? Was there going to be an adequate budget support by the government? I mean, what measures does the government have in place to ensure the sustainability of the project? Because there's nothing worse that can happen is that you build a project 5 years and 10 years later it's cracking, it's falling, and it's unusable. So we put a lot of emphasis on sustainability. And if it's a project which is a revenue generating project, whether it's a power plant with tariffs, generation is going to be used towards the maintenance and the monitoring of that asset over its lifetime. So sustainability is one of the 4 pillars on which we assess the project's outcome and whether it reached its impact. And that can determine whether the development outcome was highly successful, or really less than successful. And we do an honest assessment on it. But sustainability is something also where we're finding a lot of pressure from the board to improve on that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Oseno, your thoughts?
So very quickly, what I want to say is what we have done well and what keeps us awake at night. What we did well, I think even collectively, is implement what we call the performance standards in terms of environmental, social, and governance. I think we've managed to ensure that our projects are abiding by those rules, and we're even sometimes blamed for being a little bit too demanding in that regard. What keeps us awake at night is a climate component. Whether you include it or not in ESG, making sure that more and more of our financing goes to climate impact. And why it keeps us awake at night is because in many countries, you need concessional resources, meaning cheap money, in order to get to that impact. And we don't always have access to these concessional resources. And the flip side is ensuring that projects are not exposed too much to climate risk, or when they're exposed, you can protect them so that if the risk occurs, the company doesn't face liquidity problems, or the project in the country doesn't face asset deterioration problems. So having the insurance schemes or the mechanisms to protect those projects against the detriments of climate risk is another issue that we need to tackle.
Thank you, Oseno. Natasha, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you. And I want to very much echo what Oseno was saying, that a very clear part of our mandate is to ensure that all of the projects that we finance are environmentally sustainable. So we do a very significant environmental assessment of projects ex ante, but also we have committed to at least 50% of our projects being green, focusing again on the green agenda and ensuring that all of our projects are Paris-aligned. So this is an extremely important objective for us. But here, again, echoing Oseno, I think one of the challenges that we have is ensuring that we have the necessary data when we monitor projects, and this is something that we are focusing right now on developing.
Well, that's a good point. Data, I think, is something that is going to be increasingly important, right? Guido, your thoughts?
Thank you. Indeed, I can echo my colleagues, but I would like also to table a challenge. So when we talk about environmental sustainability, of course, This is something that has become of primary importance. EIB is the climate bank of the European Union, so of course for us is a critical objective. However, when we talk about sustainability, we have to think that sustainability has different facets. First of all, we look at a project from an economic and financial sustainability point of view. So if a project is green, but will not be able to come to completion, it defeats the purpose. So clearly, we look at bankable projects that are the capacity to generate the cash flows to repay the debt. Second, you need to have also a technical sustainability. If you are investing in a project which is particularly good in climate terms, but whose technology is doubtful and would potentially not generate the results that are expected, you might get to a point whereby you have achieved the opposite of what you wanted to achieve in the first place. So this is to say, when we talk about sustainability, everybody talks about sustainability expecting a lot of green, but it's a transition. It's a transition that requires new technologies, new ways of creating and implementing projects. And this should not be forgotten.
All right, well, thank you. And Ka, maybe you can bring us home on this one. I know that I'm a little closer to AIIB, and I know that you're very much focused on this.
Same as our MDB peers, AIIB also very much supporting all the green financing, and we have a target for climate financing 50% by 2025. In fact, we already achieved last year and also are going to achieve this year. We also want all our projects to be Paris aligned. In fact, all the new projects have meet that deadline by July this year already. So, you know, for our project, we do accept a very high ESG standards and try to achieve more green and environment benefits. But the challenge for us is, I think it's more really on the implementation, right? We can design and prepare those projects meeting all these requirements and targets. But then once it's, you know, the rubber hits the road, whether we can actually deliver those environmental benefits, I think that's a challenge for us. You know, obviously monitoring that, you know, data is a challenge. How we can get sufficient data to help us track that development. But I think more importantly, it's about the you know, capacity of our clients, as Natasha mentioned earlier. So from that perspective, we ask, you know, when we look at the project preparation and the implementation, we're not just trying to say, okay, one single project, you follow our ESG, you comply with our requirement. We are more now going into, you know, the whole corporation, right? If we provide a loan to this organization, whether they can actually, you know, expand and utilize our policies for the rest operation. So how to build up that capacity and how to help them achieve that. It's a challenge, but we do have quite a few projects, and including some innovative, you know, project to, you know, to support the whole market development. Yeah, so that's still something, you know, in progress. Maybe a few years later, we can report back how much we have achieved. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Ka. And we have covered, you know, a range of topics, and I think just listening, I've been impressed by the, you know, not only the level of expertise that's needed to manage the complex range of products, but also increasingly agility. And I think that's going to be tested in the near term, and it's a challenge that I'm sure the banks are all, you know, up for and working more closely together as we've heard commented. What we'd like to do now is go to the audience for some questions. We probably have time for a couple. Okay. Yes, sir.
Eugene Simon, Rivers Without Boundaries Coalition. Just to put the clarity of monitoring question. Just wanted to get clarity from each bank on a very simple monitoring question. What is the key sort of tool for actual monitoring after financing has happened of environmental compliance and environmental performance of the project? What is the actual arrangement? Is it done against what's written in environmental social management plan? It should, I expect it's different in different banks, or there are other sort of tools and indicators which are used to monitor actual environmental and social performance, first of all, environmental performance of the projects you fund, and what is the key tool of actually insisting on compliance after the funds have been disbursed, after the client got all the money and you still monitor, what are your options?
Okay, sir, we may not, that is a wonderful question. We may not have time for each. So what I'll do is I'll just select a couple. Is that okay? Okay, fine. Okay. Rehan, why don't you give us...
Yeah. My microphone is on. Yeah, just to respond to our colleague there, as I mentioned earlier, we have a project performance rating system. It has 5 indicators. One of them is actually environment and social safeguards. So we assess it on a quarterly basis, and there's 8 criteria built into it, whether civil works have progressed. That civil works cannot progress until all the environmental framework, et cetera, the social compliance has been met, and so forth. There's 8 indicators. So that is, second is review missions. I mean, we don't just send the money out and then tell the client, and please tell me when your project's complete and I'll come down and, prepare the project. No, we're working with the client. The client is in the driving seat, but we work. And where there may be a bit of gap in terms of capacity for social and environmental, we will use our technical assistance funds to supplement that capacity. But be rest assured that environmental and social compliance is essentially critical to a project, yeah? If there's and we will not proceed with any project unless these safeguards are all in place and all that. We have actually a dedicated office of safeguards with almost about 150 experts whose job is just to measure this compliance. Thank you.
Great. Guido, do you have a thought?
Yes, we similar to AIIB, we have also an internal monitoring system specific to project. This is not run by portfolio management, but is run by the project team, which is dedicated to project analysis and monitoring. And they have independent monitoring missions to discuss with clients the progress according to the expected. And we have a number of undertakings in the contract that allow